What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman. Here for a little mock draft Wednesday. Dalton, the alliteration doesn't fit as much there, but we got a fun one. When the Godfather himself, Mel Kiper Jr., drops his, I believe, last mock draft. I think he said this is going to be the last mock draft that he does of this draft cycle. Maybe he'll give us one more like right before the draft, but I feel like I saw that somewhere. But either way, it's a big deal. Anytime he's dropping a mock draft, we got to pay attention. We're going to look over it. It's not only one round, it is 2 rounds. We're not going to go over all 2 rounds here on this show, but we are going to go through round 1, shout out a couple of our favorite picks from that exercise. Dalton, how you doing, my friend?
We're good. Look, every day is mock draft day. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is.
That's true.
At this time of year, only 2 weeks away. Look, there's an endless number of scenarios, and it feels like I keep trying to just find more and more and more of them, and then everybody else has their opinions on how this is going to go. And I think now it feels like the consensus on this draft is past maybe the top 3 or 4, and even within the top 4, we really have no idea what's going to happen aside from maybe the first overall pick. So it's going to be a lot of fun on draft night to see how it all unfolds, and then obviously throughout the weekend how each team starts building their roster.
Yeah, and when we get to sort of talk about some of these pairings that we have here, first and second round, then you really get to talk about total draft hauls and draft strategies. So it's going to be a good episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we dig into it, today's episode is brought to you by Ultra GM. We got Walt in the chat right now saying GM Walt is in the chat. If you want to be a GM yourself, you got to check out Ultra GM, a truly revolutionary new take on fantasy football that is bringing to life the fantasy of being a general manager for your favorite team. How many times you guys sat there and thought, man, I could run my favorite team better than my GM? Well, Ultra GM actually gives you the chance to prove it. Choose your team, acquire that team's full roster, build and shape it through free agency, the college draft, trades, and even practice squad guys as well. It goes pretty deep here. You'll even manage the real salary cap, real player contracts, using Ultra GM's tools to make it very easy to do that. In Ultra GM, all the players are scored, including offensive linemen and special teamers, and the score reflects the true value of each position and the football action that they play. Compete against family, friends, strangers, and even your team's real GM to see who is the Ultra GM here. No fantasy football platform or GM simulator has ever provided this degree of and engagement that Ultra GM offers. Think you'd be better at GM than your favorite team? Ultra GM is your chance to prove it. Visit ultragm.com and sign up today. We'll play a little bit of GM here on this show, a little GM for every team in the NFL. Maybe GM analyst, where we're going to take a look at how Mel Kiper orchestrated his first round mock draft, and then we're sort of going to give our thoughts, how much we agree or not. We do a lot of mock drafts on the show. It's good to get some outside voices in here, especially when it is one as respected as the great Mel Kiper Jr. So at the very top of the list, Dalton, which you guys can go see this mock draft for yourself over at ESPN.com. Get an ESPN Plus account, support not only Mel, but also, Field Yates, Jordan Reed, Matt Miller, all those guys who are doing fantastic draft work over there, the guys at ESPN. Number 1 overall, drum roll, please. Oh, my goodness. I can't believe what I am seeing. Just kidding. It's Cam Ward. It's Cam Ward at number 1 overall. No surprise there, Dalton. We won't go individually every single pick and spend a ton of detail on these because there's some that we figure we already know are going to happen. At number 1 overall, feels all but a lock that the Titans are going to take Cam Ward here.
This feels like the one safe pick to make in this entire draft right now. And look, the Titans need a quarterback. Cam Ward was the highest graded quarterback in college football. There's not a whole lot else that needs to be said. Otherwise, on top of the fact that they canceled their private workouts with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, this feels like a formality at this point. You're right, Trev.
Now, I'm with you here. Gordon in the chat saying that Kiper kind of cooked with this mock draft. I agree. When I was reading this mock draft as we were getting ready for this show, I was like, okay, all right, I can see this pick. This is not only realistic, but I think this one makes sense. And when we get into the second round, obviously, we'll be able to dive into that even a little bit more with some of our favorite selections that we have there. Number 2 overall. Now, this is, I think, where the draft really begins. Kiper is going with sort of the trend of where it feels like a lot of the betting markets are going as well, with Travis Hunter here at number 2 overall. So Travis Hunter over a quarterback, over the Shedeur Sanders pick, over Abdul Carter as well. That pairing of Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter, they're overlooking that to bring in a player like Travis Hunter, who they said that they viewed more as a wide receiver, which given their roster construction, it feels as though that would make sense if they were to take him number 2 overall here. But What do you think about Travis Hunter being the pick here now at number 2 overall?
I think it makes a little bit more sense than Abdul Carter when you think about this was already a team number 1 in run defense grade, number 3 in pass rush grade last season. If they add Abdul Carter, it feels like a luxury on a team with a lot of other weaknesses, particularly at receiver and at corner, and Hunter could help you at both. You mentioned it, Andrew Berry at the Combine talked about he thinks Travis Hunter is a wide receiver first, and if they feel like he can be a number 1 type wide receiver, be that complement to Jerry Jeudy, to David Njoku, and maybe help them out at times at corner, and I think Jim Schwartz, he runs a whole lot more man coverage than a lot of other teams, so the scheme would be simpler if he were to use Hunter to moonlight at corner as well, but I think that's their belief that Travis Hunter is the best receiver in this draft if they were to take him 2nd overall. And look, at the end of the day, I think he's the best. I think he's the best football player in this draft. I think he's certainly the top non-quarterback in this draft. And I think to pass up an athlete like this, if you're the Browns, when you need those athletes outside on the perimeter on both sides of the ball, that would be really tough. And I know Abdul Carter is tantalizing and putting him with Myles Garrett, but you can't just win a game with your defensive line. You need athletes on the outside, and Travis Hunter's the best one out there.
So how much do you, because I heard you talking there, and I agree. I think that a lot of people are going to think about this when it comes to Travis Hunter and trying to picture him with the Browns. I think he is more of a wide receiver for them, but for a while, the reason why I said, hey, draft Travis Hunter as a corner, because I think you can play him at corner full time and then give him a handful of wide receiver snaps. I'm not really convinced that you're able to do the same, the opposite, vice versa. Starting him as a full-time wide receiver and then just saying go out there and play a couple of snaps at corner. That's not really how the defensive side of the football works unless you're like a heavy man coverage team and you just tell him, hey, just make sure that this guy doesn't catch the ball. Maybe you can do that at the NFL level, although it's a tough ask. Martin Emerson is slated to be the starting outside corner opposite Denzel Ward for the Cleveland Browns, and he's somebody who I can understand them going into next year with him as a starting corner, but could you upgrade from him? Yeah, I think that that's possible. So how possible do you think it is that Travis Hunter could legitimately be that type of a player where he could, like you said, play a handful of snaps at corner? Do you think that that's risky? Because I personally do. I for as talented as this guy is, and he seems to impress me even when I thought things were sort of impossible about how well he's able to play on both sides of the ball. He's proven me wrong a couple of times before, so I guess this wouldn't be the first time. I just get skeptical of him playing corner as the spot position rather than the other way around. What do you think about that for Cleveland? Do you think they would be tempted by that, given the fact that they might be able to upgrade from Emerson as well as get a good wide receiver here?
Yeah, I think it's very tempting. I think, look, I'm of the belief that we can't take anything off the table for Travis Hunter. Who's to say, he couldn't play 70% of the snaps both ways, because we've seen him do it his entire college career, and he won the Heisman Trophy doing it, right? I think this is a different prospect. This is not somebody, even in college, he didn't moonlight one way or the other. He played every single snap of every game, right? So again, the physicality might keep him from playing close to 100% of the snaps like he did in some games, 130, 140 snaps, but I think this is the fun when you talk about this draft and Travis Hunter, because he is something we've never seen before. I think he's determined to get a shot to play both ways. He has said that. He believes he's different, that he can do it. I think you let him. I think you give him a shot to play as much as he can handle on both sides of the ball. If he can help you on both sides, he suddenly becomes as valuable as two players. And even I remember Max Chadwick was throwing in the numbers on this. If he were to do what he did in college at an NFL level on both sides of the ball or something close to it, he becomes almost as valuable as a quarterback, right? Because there's such a difference in value between quarterbacks and everybody else. But if you can help on both sides of the ball to that level, you become arguably one of the most valuable players in the NFL. I think he gets a shot to play both ways.
Yeah, it's why I feel as though the Titans maybe should have tried to do a little bit more at quarterback to at least open up the possibility for them to take Travis Hunter. And that, sort of what you said and the evidence that Max brought to the table is why I have him as the number 1 overall prospect in this class. Number 3, it's the New York Giants. Kiper does, flirt with them potentially taking Shedeur Sanders. He mentions that he doesn't think Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson's the long-term answer there, but ultimately he does go with Abdul Carter. Now, at the end of his little blurb, which again, you guys should go sign up for an ESPN Plus account and read the mock draft, because it's not just the picks, it's also the analysis of it as well. At the very end, he says they do really have something there with Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence up front. Most recently on the NFL Stock Exchange show, myself, Connor Rogers, and Marcus Whitman, we went through a new first-round mock draft, and we actually had the Giants drafting Abdul Carter, but with that, we also then explored maybe a Kayvon Thibodeau trade as well, because if they're drafting Abdul Carter, I think the talking point here and what I want to ask you is Abdul Carter a good football player and would he be on the board for the Giants? I think both of the answers to those questions is yes. But what happens with Kayvon Thibodeau then? Because it's sort of interesting. I think that Carter, as that off-ball linebacker turning into an on-ball linebacker, he's closer to sort of the position that Brian Burns really plays as that flexible guy who could drop into coverage and plays consistently from a two-point stance, and you're just using him very versatilely. So his role is more towards that of Brian Burns, but you're not going to trade Brian Burns if you're the New York Giants. If anything, you would trade Kayvon Thibodeau. So it's sort of a two-part question for you. If the Giants draft Abdul Carter, not questioning the talent of it, what do you do here? Are you comfortable keeping all of those defensive linemen on the team? Would you look to move on from Thibodeau, use him in a package to maybe trade up later in the draft, probably somewhere on day 2, maybe jumping back into the first round because they have an early second round pick and they could package that and Kayvon Thibodeau to, I don't know, just an example, a team like the Green Bay Packers, right? You could sell them on, hey, here's a defensive lineman. If you don't love the defensive linemen that are on the board, when you come up at number 23, we'll give you Thibodeau. We'll give you our early second round pick. Boom. Then we could go move up to 23, draft maybe a quarterback or whoever it would be for the Giants. It's just one example. But what do you think of that scenario? What happens to Kayvon Thibodeau if they draft Abdul Carter here?
I think there's a couple of important things. One, he will get dangled on draft weekend. I think he'll get dangled in trade talks. I think then you're talking about Carter and Brian Burns being the two main edge guys there, and they'll figure out the depth beyond that. If Thibodeau doesn't get traded, if they don't feel like they get a package for him in return that they want, then I don't think they're going to pick up his fifth-year option, and they'll ride out the season with all three of them, and he'll likely be a free agent next year, right? Obviously, he's had, some good pressure totals in his career, some good sack totals in his career, but the grading hasn't been as high. It's a lot of cleanup. It's a lot of unblocked, that sort of thing. He hasn't panned out to being as good as the 5th overall pick should have been. So I do think, they could ride it out for another year, but this is exactly why, and that complication is the reason that I think Shedeur Sanders is still on the board, and I actually think very much a trade down from this spot could be on the board, because now it's going to be assumed that if Travis Hunter's off the board and Abdul Carter is still there and the Giants are picking, teams are going to want to get ahead of New England if they want Abdul Carter, right? We've mentioned scenarios before with the Carolina Panthers, with the Chicago Bears. Wouldn't even shock me if the New Orleans Saints got in that conversation where you're going to have to get ahead of New England. If Abdul Carter is on the board for New England at 4, they're going to take him, right? So I think the Giants suddenly become a prime trade down spot. And I think actually the ideal scenario for me here, I know we're talking about the Giants drafting Carter because he's best player available, and there are scenarios where they could do that and feel like, okay, our pass rush is still great, and we've upgraded from Thibodeau to Carter, depending on what we do with Thibodeau, on the trade talks. But I think the Giants would be best suited here to trade down. I know Kiper didn't do trades here. Trade down, maybe to 8 or 10, and then you could still get Shedeur Sanders at a lower pick while recouping some draft capital. I think that actually would be the way that I might go about this if they feel comfortable enough that they could drop, if they could drop to 8 and they know the Raiders and the Jets wouldn't take Shedeur Sanders. I think that would actually be the ideal move because you get draft capital, you get your quarterback, you didn't feel the pressure of having to take Sanders third. That might be where I go with this. But if they take Carter, I would fully expect Thibodeau to be on the trade block for the rest of the weekend.
I do agree with you there. MA Football Guy said, hoping my Patriots can get things going again. Well, we'll see here with the number 4 overall pick. And then Travis also said draft begins at 4. And I think there's a lot of people who do agree that that is the case because you figure it's going to be Cam Ward and then some order of Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. So the draft beginning at 4. What do the Patriots take from Mel Kiper's draft? Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU. Now, Mel says he's not worried about the shorter arms, the sub-33-inch arms. He said that he would slide right in at left tackle for this team. They signed Morgan Moses to play right tackle for them. Now they would have Will Campbell to play left tackle, and you'd sort of figure it out to get the best 5 out there on the interior. Now, this was one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL last year. Most pressures allowed. I'm not sure if they gave up the most sacks off the top of my head, but consistently just giving up so many pressures last year from all 5 spots. I mean, it was a disaster. So you can understand them leaning into offensive line here, but is Will Campbell the right pick? If they're going to go offensive line, Dalton, I think it is. He's my top offensive lineman that I have in this year's draft. I just trust him so much with how he approaches the game, how smart he is, how steady he's been over the last 3 years. Yeah, there are times when he loses with not having that elite length and just overall NFL size, but he understands how to play in the trenches very, very well, and he is still a young player. I think people got to remember that. I know he talks like a veteran, and we've been talking about Will Campbell for a while, but he is just a junior. He started the last 3 years at left tackle for LSU, so he is still young. He is still only going to get better, and I think he's got the right mentality to be one of the better offensive linemen in the NFL. So I would be taking Campbell here at number 4 if the thought was upgrade the offensive line. What say you?
Agreed with this. Left tackle is the biggest hole in their team right now, and Mike Vrabel has even said he views Will Campbell as a left tackle first. Let him play there. If he's going to fail, then fail at left tackle first and then move him inside. I think he fully believes Will Campbell can be his franchise left tackle to be that blindside protector for Drake May, and they've got 3 picks on day 2 to bulk up the weaponry. I think certainly the running back position will be in focus on day 2, and I think wide receiver help. Also, they signed Stephon Diggs. They have Kendrick Bourne. They've got some young guys, but I think they're going to still look to help the skill positions on day 2. But I think if Carter's off the board, if one of the elite talents is off the board here, Carter or Hunter, then Campbell's the right move. Plug and play left tackle. I don't think there's any issue there. And you mentioned it, still a really young player who was so productive for 3 years in the SEC.
So these next 3 picks here, we've talked before plenty of times. We've made these mock draft selections here on this channel, so I'll just list off all 3 of them, and if you have any thoughts on them. Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan, going to the Jags at number 5. Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, going to the Raiders at 6, and then Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Missouri, going at number 7 to the New York Jets. He's still sticking with Ashton Jeanty as the pick here at number 6. Any of those 3 selections there that you want to touch on? Because number 8 and number 9, I think, actually give us some good talking points that I want to hit on.
I think they all make some semblance of sense. I absolutely believe, if Travis Hunter's not on the board, the Jags pick should be Mason Graham. I think they should run the card in. It's a perfect fit, the last piece of their front 7 that could make their front 7 really good. Jeanty to the Raiders makes sense. I think, to me, again, this whole time it's been a coin flip for me between Ashton Jeanty and Tetairoa McMillan. I get it. Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. They've got a pretty good offensive line. They were dead last in rushing grade last year. I have no issue with Jeanty going that high. And then I think there's a better argument here with the Jets at 7, because yes, they don't necessarily have a set in stone starter at right tackle, but this is going to be the debate. You go there and you solidify all 5 spots in this offensive line now with Membu, or do you start attacking the skill positions early? Because they have basically nothing at tight end, and they don't have anything beyond Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. I don't know. I'm caught in between on this, Trev. I'll be honest with you. I've been mocking Tyler Warren to them. I think Tetairoa McMillan could be a possibility. I know they signed Josh Reynolds, but that's a placeholder. They're holding on to Alan Lazard. This is a team, if they take Membu, that I think is going to be very short of weapons come this season. Now, are they going to run the ball? Yeah, with Justin Fields and Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, they're going to run the hell out of the football, especially with Membu there at right tackle now. I think there's going to be a real debate about the Jets, about offensive linemen versus skill player, because they're going to be very thin at the skill spots if they take Membu with the 7th pick.
So you would be going with skill position player, it sounds like.
I would be probably picking towards leaning towards either Tyler Warren or Tetairoa McMillan,
who both are on the board in this scenario. So and I don't want to push back too far on you. The only, because I do like both of these players. Both of them I believe are top 10 prospects for me. So I would understand that for the Jets, but I think I just believe it's so much easier to get skill position players. So much easier. You have multiple opportunities every single year to get good skill position players. The trade market always seems to have a handful of guys that are out there that you can bring into your team. Now, if you want to say, oh, well, there's a reason why the team that they're currently on is giving up on them. Okay, I understand that. The free agency period, I think you have a chance to get wide receivers, and especially the draft. I talk about this with other draft analysts all the time. I don't know if we're ever going to see another terrible wide receiver draft class. When we talk about, what positions are the strength and the weaknesses of the class? I don't know if we're ever going to have a draft class ever again where wide receiver is the weakness, because there's just so much development from middle school all the way through when these guys are draft eligible. There are so many skill position camps and opportunities for them to get great coaching, and offenses nowadays are so spread out and so wide receiver heavily involved that these guys just hone their craft a lot sooner. So you get a lot more wide receivers that are more polished and they're better. And I think when you're younger, with the rise of 7-on-7, you get a lot more kids who maybe would have played other positions, defensive positions. Well, if they want to sign up to play the game of football and flag football and 7-on-7, guess what? They're probably going to be a wide receiver. So now you're developing just more wide receivers that way. So I just think it's a long process to say you have the opportunity to draft skill position players, really good skill position players, every single year. You don't always have that opportunity, and I would say it's much more seldom to draft the offensive tackle that you want. So if you really like this player, I don't hate the players of Tetsuo McMillan and Tyler Warren. I think they would be excellent choices for the New York Jets. But I would pretty clearly and comfortably be taking Membu in this spot because I'd much rather make the offensive line what I ideally want it to be, knowing I'll have the opportunity to get skill position players later, especially since they don't know who the long-term quarterback option is, right?
Well, and I was just gonna say, because I'm so used to mocking him to the Giants that I almost forgot he was on the board here, but I think Shedeur Sanders should still be in heavy consideration here. I really do. I know Justin Fields, it's a 2-year deal, but it's really a 1-year deal with heavy guarantees. I still think that should be in consideration. They still don't have a long-term plan. And I know Aaron Glenn is committed to, he said it before, we can win with Justin Fields. We can play winning football with Justin Fields. I get it. They're going to try to, but I still think even Shedeur Sanders should be in heavy consideration here when you're talking about a team that perpetually is looking for a long-term answer at quarterback. Even if you wanted to draft Shedeur and then still play Fields for at least the beginning of this season, I don't have an issue with that. But they don't have a long-term answer there either, because from what we've seen of Justin Fields, he hasn't shown that he can be that. So, I mean, if they sign him to a stopgap contract, it feels like a stopgap. I think Shedeur Sanders should still be on the board for them as well at 7 if he's there.
Carolina Panthers number 8. We'll talk more about Shedeur because he's going to come off the board here in a second, but not number 8. Carolina Panthers are taking Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. I think that this is well within the realm of possibility. And Mel Kiper has noted that I think he has done 4 mock drafts at this point for the 2025 cycle, and he says this makes it 4 mock drafts in a row that I have had Walker to the Carolina Panthers. The more I'm kind of hearing from that situation is they really like him. I know they had him in for a top 30 visit. So, this is somebody who is very clearly going to be very high on their radar, and there's a lot of analysts out there who believe that he is eventually going to be a top 10 pick. I know Mike Mayock loves him as well, former general manager and former NFL draft analyst for NFL Network. And so there's a lot of people out there that think that the NFL is very high on Jalen Walker, and the more I kind of hear, the more I understand that. Now, me personally, as somebody who's evaluating Jalen Walker, I can totally understand why you want to buy into the player, how he approaches the game, the fact that his dad was a defense coordinator. He's grown up around the game. He's so smart in his high football IQ and how he analyzes not only what he does well, but where he needs to improve. And the worry that I have is, does he have a home base? Right? Is it off-ball linebacker? Is it edge? If you say that it's edge, well, he's not really built like an edge rusher at the NFL, so he'd have to be really special in that regard. And if he's going to play off-ball linebacker, then I just think he's got a long way to go in terms of instincts in coverage and feel for really playing in space and in that off-ball linebacker role. That's not to say those things cannot develop for him. But at number 8 overall, you really got to be able to nail that, especially for a defense that really struggled in both run defense and pass rush last year. So I don't think that they're choosing Jalen Walker in this scenario over an obvious, what are you doing, that's crazy type of a scenario. But it's just something to think about here. So Jalen Walker to Carolina here at number 8. What do you think about this one?
I think the idea is a more explosive version of what they used to have with Frankie Louvu, where he would play linebacker on early downs and he would play off the edge in passing downs. And Walker athletically can handle both of those things, and they have a need at both spots, right off the edge and at linebacker, like you just mentioned. There will still be concerns in coverage, but there's concerns down the middle of their coverage unit throughout the entire thing, right? They need to get better at safety. They probably need to add another coverage linebacker maybe later in the draft in this scenario, right? And figure out how Ejiro Evero is going to structure this defense around Walker, because that's the idea. If you take Walker this high, you're going to structure your entire defense around him at all times, okay? That includes the pass rush and the D-line. That includes linebacker on early downs. It's going to be a lot for him to handle. There might be an adjustment period, especially since this is the lowest graded defense in the league last year, but I get the idea because they have had this type of player before, and he's much more explosive as an athlete than Frankie Louvu was. I don't know that he's necessarily built in run defense like that yet. You mentioned he's a little bit smaller. Even as a linebacker, he's kind of average size. So I think there's going to be some adjustments on early downs for sure as far as stopping the run, but I do get the idea of what they're going for, having that Frankie Louvu type of piece in there. And if Walker's an even better athlete with more speed, then you mentioned it, they can try to teach him the elements of coverage when they need to drop him off. But I would expect early that he's going to be rushing the passer a lot on passing downs.
Luvu also was phenomenal with Evero, in that last year that he was with the Carolina Panthers. And so it's a good shout out there, sort of the mold that they would want that player to sort of be able to attach to the defense with. And so that example at least gives you something to materialize in your head of like, okay, this is how they're going to use him. And Luvu was excellent for them in Ejiro Evero's defense before he jumped over to the Washington Commanders in free agency. Shedeur Sanders comes off the board here at number 9 to the New Orleans Saints. Mel says if Sanders doesn't go to the Giants, there aren't many clear landing spots for him in the top 10, and he could slide. He mentions some teams could potentially trade up for him. He doesn't mention the Steelers specifically, but sort of that conversation that we had before. The Browns potentially trading up from the second round back into the first for him. The Giants could be the case. The Steelers obviously picking at number 21. Do they feel like they want to use that pick on a quarterback since they no longer have a second round selection and they don't pick into the third? He also mentions that Sanders is his top quarterback in the draft, so he sees Sanders similar to the way that you do. What do you think about him and his potential to go number 9 overall? Do you think that this is realistic here for Sanders?
I think it's realistic. I do, especially when you talk about in this scenario Will Campbell and Armand Membu, who I think should be two of maybe the very top players on the Saints board, along probably with Mason Graham. I think with all those guys gone, you really start to think about this. Now, Derek Carr is going to be there in 2025. He's going to be their starter opening week of 2025. But they're going to move on from him after that with his contract situation and kind of the decline in play that we've seen. And in part because the Saints have been just terrible in the trenches. They were last in pass blocking grade last year. So I think that would be the concern for me is you have the same argument that we just had with the Jets of, okay, do you bulk up in the trenches first before you even bother finding a quarterback, or you're just not going to protect him? Or do you trust that those young guys you already have are going to develop? Maybe you draft somebody to play left guard later in this draft, a Tate Ratledge or somebody like that, and you take a quarterback so you know what your plan is beyond Derek Carr because you know he's only going to be your quarterback in 2025, right? So I think that's the big debate, either offensive or defensive line. I think you could easily argue a defensive lineman with this pick. But if the Saints likes, it's the same rule with quarterbacks. If you like a guy enough, if you think he can be your franchise guy. And I do like the idea of Sanders going down there. You have Chris Olave, right? You have, Rashid Shaheed down there. They brought in Brandon Cooks. And you talk about him playing in a dome, everybody's worried about, he doesn't have an A-plus arm or A-plus mobility. But if you talk about an accurate ball distributor, right, in the Superdome, we've seen that work for a long time before, right, as long as obviously he can adjust to NFL game speed and they can protect him. So I do get the logic for sure. If they're looking long-term, if Kellen Moore thinks Shedeur Sanders is this guy long-term beyond Derek Carr, then pull the trigger on it. I get it.
Walt, who normally pushes back on some of the picks that we have, seems to be very stride for stride here with Mel Kiper in the chat. So Walt giving Mel Kiper Jr., loves the company he's in.
The experts are the experts.
We know that Walt is general manager, self-proclaimed general manager, but a general manager nonetheless, as he opens up the chat with, which we absolutely love. So we appreciate you getting in on this, Walt. I think Sanders going 9 overall is, to me, it's more of a statement about sort of what they think about their franchise and Derek Carr. I know they didn't move on from him, but it's sort of this, do they have what they need to turn the page, right? Are they looking at a situation where their division foe, the Atlanta Falcons, took a quarterback maybe a little bit earlier than most people thought that they were going to? I think in the timeline, not just sort of where Michael Penix Jr. was selected, but I mean early is more of like the timeline. They just signed Kirk Cousins. They already had him under contract. And think of where the Falcons would be right now if they did not have Michael Penix Jr. It looked bad. It looked real bad in Atlanta right now. And so I wonder if the Saints are sort of in a situation where they're going, all right, we got Carr under contract. We don't love it. So let's get a quarterback that we could potentially love and spend a first-round pick on it. I just wonder if that's sort of their thought process as well, watching what happened with Michael Penix. Walt also mentioned that if he goes to the NFC South, not only is he playing in a dome with the New Orleans Saints, but also really won't have to travel for cold weather much, because as much as some people might completely write this off, I don't love Shedeur Sanders' overall arm strength if you start getting him in November and December in the cold and when the wind's blowing hard and all that. I don't think he has the arm to like rip it through the elements, if you will. He's a very accurate quarterback. I think he's got a good enough arm to be a starter at the NFL level, but you and I have just, we sort of disagree in this area of how much that really holds him back. But that's sort of the way that I view this situation. I think it's a good landing spot for him. Kellen Moore, again, you get to play in a dome, you get to play in the NFC South. I think it's a good landing spot for him. So if it's going to be somewhere, I don't hate the landing spot. I don't know if it's going to be this early. Somebody in the chat, I can't remember who this was asking about the Steelers potentially trading up. Oh, this is CJ. CJ asked, what would be fair trade compensation for a trade up for the Steelers to move up to number 8 to go get Shedeur Sanders in front of the New Orleans Saints here? He says, I know they don't have a second rounder this year. The honest answer to that question is probably next year's first. To get from 21 all the way to 8, you not having a second round pick, it could have maybe been your second rounder this year and your second rounder next year. But since you don't have a second rounder this year, the answer to that question is probably it's going to be next year's first round pick. So it'd be 21 and probably next year's first round pick to jump up to number 8. And I just cannot see the Steelers doing that. Well, I'll go a little rapid fire here with the next couple of picks. Chicago Bears, and you just sort of point out which ones that you want to talk about out of this group. We got Tyler Warren. Or sorry, not we, Mel Kiper Jr., has Tyler Warren going to the Chicago Bears at number 10. Remember, no Ashton Jeanty on the board for this, so assuming that it's over maybe an offensive line pick of somebody that might still be on the board. Omarion Hampton, he ends up going with Tyler Warren here at number 10. The San Francisco 49ers, Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. Dallas Cowboys, this is where Omarion Hampton comes off the board, the running back from UNC. Miami Dolphins, Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. Indianapolis Colts, They don't get Tyler Warren, but they do get a tight end in Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan. 15, the Atlanta Falcons taking Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall. And then 16, Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas, going to Arizona there. Let's pick out one or two and sort of talk about it there within those picks.
I think there's two clear headliners. We'll start with the Bears with Tyler Warren at number 10. And the alarms that go off in my head just screaming 12 personnel, 12 personnel, 12 personnel, like Cole Kmet, Tyler Warren on the field constantly, mauling people in the run game, getting into the play action work from 12 personnel with 2 tight ends and then Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, on the field with them. I think then you talk about going running back maybe in the second round, but I think if you get Tyler Warren in here, you really then get a feel for what Ben Johnson wants to do with this offense, right? Because we're still a little in the dark. They don't really have a slot receiver. They don't really have a second tight end right now. If you're drafting Tyler Warren as your second or 1A and 1B tight end with Cole Kmet, we know exactly what this offense is trying to do, and it's going to be very hard to stop. So I do think this might be a dark horse pick. Again, I think it's more... I expect it more so to be either Ashton Jeanty if he's on the board or a defensive lineman. I think defensive line would be very much in play here. But Tyler Warren, I think for the sake of offensive personnel and what Ben Johnson would be trying to do in trying to, set the tone with this offense, especially in the run game, I think Tyler Warren is a very interesting pick here. I think it's something that we need to brace for the possibility of, especially knowing what he did with Sam Laporta so quickly in Detroit. I think that's a big-time possibility. And then I think at number 12, look, I like Omarion Hampton a lot. I think this is off the wall. I think both for the sake of the Cowboys and the fact that they just signed fellow former North Carolina running back Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders in free agency. And I know, look, those guys don't prevent you from taking a superstar. If this was Ashton Jeanty, I might feel different. But the Cowboys have a lot of other needs, and I just don't know that Hampton solves any of that. I think they need to get better on the offensive line. I think they certainly still need to get better in run defense. I don't think they fixed their run defense problem at all in free agency. This would be something on defense. Jahad Campbell, maybe you think about Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan here. It would more likely be a defensive player for me at 12.
Yeah, I can't remember who said this in the chat, but I loved it when we were talking about running backs in our running back episode. They actually said that their pro comp for Omarion Hampton was DeMarco Murray. And I actually like that a lot. So, thinking about him in Dallas, I think it's very easy to sort of streamline their talents and everything that they could bring to the table. I think that you make the changes. I'll just say changes because I know additions. They also lost Rico Dowdle, but bringing in Miles Sanders, bringing in Javonte Williams, that allows you to not feel like you have to take a running back at number 12. So, especially with offensive line needs, with wide receiver needs, I would not be taking a running back at number 12 if I was Dallas. I would think that even if Ashton Jeanty's on the board, I'd probably be waiting for it. there's a lot of really good running backs in this class. I think Genty's at the very top, and some teams should be very interested in him because they already have the rest set up. Like Chicago. Chicago, I think, is in a situation where, yeah, you can look at everything that Genty is and everything he brings to the table because you already feel good about the offensive line that you have, the quarterback, the offensive weapons. You feel good about the defensive side of the football. So you don't have to sit here and weigh the pros of what Genty is as a prospect versus the cons of the draft value of a running back just overall, because you've already set your team up to where you can make that type of a pick. So for a team like Chicago, I understand it. Even a team like the Raiders, I could really understand it. And that's a top 6 pick, and so you're probably taking him over some really good football players, especially some offensive linemen that might be available. But the offensive line, I think, is good enough right now, and you could make the case that I saw somebody. I can't remember if it was in NFLSE's comment section or PFF's, but somebody was saying that the Raiders aren't in win now mode because of their defense. I don't think you can't make the trade for Geno Smith and then just go, yeah, no, we're in a couple year rebuild here. Whether you like it or not, they traded for Geno Smith, and they're going to hit the gas pedal a little bit. Now, I don't think the gas pedal's to the floor. They obviously have to solve their cornerback needs and making up for some other defensive positions that they could upgrade before they're really legitimately competing. But make no mistake, you traded for Geno to compete now, to get a lot better. They're not going to be content with just sitting back, and especially with Geno with the age that he is, just going, yeah, we're going to be bad this year, but, we'll start to build for next year and beyond. That's not going to happen. So I think that they are more comfortable with their offensive line. I think that Genty is certainly on the board for them, but that just continues the running back conversation that we had there at 12. The picks that I think are very interesting here is San Francisco going with Will Johnson over any sort of offensive or defensive lineman. That would be quite the choice for me, given how bad the San Francisco 49ers have been in the trenches. And I think they're okay at corner. I really do. They have Diamador Lenore. Now he's more of a slot guy. Could he play a little bit outside for you? They have Renardo Green. I understand they don't have Charvarius Ward anymore, but this would be more of a luxury pick, in my opinion, because you have to overlook the massive needs that they have in the trenches. So I'm not on board with that one. As much as I like Will Johnson, I still think he's a top 20 player in that class. I'm not super on board with that one just because they need so much in the trenches. And I think there's really good defensive linemen. You can take a Walter Nolan, you can take a Kenneth Grant, you can take Derek Harmon if you're that high on him, if you really wanted to. Offensive linemen, Josh Simmons, Kelvin Banks, like guys like that, in my opinion. I'd be taking all of these guys over Will Johnson. And that's not just because of the need. It's also because of how talented I think those trench players are. So I'd go trenches there for San Francisco. And then the other one is Matthew Golden to the Arizona Cardinals. I don't totally hate it because I at least think that that's the wide receiver spot they need the most. I think that they have some slot options. I think they have Marvin Harrison Jr. playing as their X. They would need a Z speed type of wide receiver, in my opinion. And I think Matthew Golden is an excellent scheme choice for them. But wide receiver, again, just going back to my conversation about how much I think it is, I think it's easier to get skill position players every single year. This, again, feels like a little bit of a luxury. Now, if they just really love Matthew Golden, if he is a top 15, top 12 player on their board, I can understand why they would be interested here. But trenches, defensive line, potentially offensive line as well for the same conversations. Kelvin Banks Jr. is still available here at this point. Josh Simmons still available here at this point. Even Gray Zabel, I'd think about him maybe at that point just to make sure you can upgrade the offensive line. But any thoughts there on Will Johnson at 11 and then Matthew Golden there at number 16?
I think corner isn't that's not that bad a pick for me. If you're talking Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron for the Niners, I can actually see that as passable, because you also have to remember they're kind of backed into a corner in this spot again without Campbell and without Membu, where if you're taking an offensive lineman, to me you're taking Kelvin Banks, right? And even then, is he flipping to the right side? Is he playing left guard? What are you doing with him? And do the 49ers like Kelvin Banks that much, right? So I think, to me, Banks should go ahead of Simmons. That wouldn't be a consideration for me. Defensive line is a really good argument. But you have to remember, too, defensive line in this draft is a lot deeper than corner is, right? They can find defensive linemen on day 2 that they feel like are starters, and if they feel like in this range, if they don't love Shamar Stewart, if they don't love a Mykel Williams, if they don't love maybe Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant enough to take him with the 11th pick, I could see corner as a selection for the Niners. I think it's probably their third biggest need. I would try to get somebody across from Renardo Greed and maybe move Lenore back into the slot. And then I think what you mentioned with the Cardinals is interesting because you could try to supercharge this offense with a receiver. I think it's a spot here, and I know he's about to go pretty quick here. I would go Jahad Campbell if I'm the Cardinals, and that's on the board. They don't have really much of anything at linebacker. They spent a boatload of money on their defensive line. I think with the outside cornerback options, especially Jahdae Barron gone, that's somebody I would think about. But if all the corners are going to be gone, but Jahad Campbell is on the board, I think that's exactly where I'd go with Arizona. Really fill out now the middle of this defense. They added a pass rusher in Josh Sweat. They kept Baron Browning. They got Calais Campbell for run defense, Dalvin Tomlinson. One more outside corner would be nice. If they're not on the board, I think it's Jahad Campbell that I would go with there in Arizona.
Well, Mel saving Jahad Campbell for the Buccaneers, I hope, at number 19. So I hope that that's actually what was going on here. Well, okay, we'll see. We'll get to the back half of the first round for Mel Kiper's mock draft, and then we're also, of course, going to talk a little bit about his second round. You guys can go see that full second round over at ESPN+. But before we get to pick number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals and beyond, got a question for all the parents out there. What's your child's future success look like for you? Could be something as simple as them owning their own business, them just being very comfortable and happy, whatever their family life looks like. Could be them getting the chance to travel the world. Whatever it is, you can help them achieve that right now, no matter how old they are, with a kid's investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kid's investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but you can with this kid's investment account. Now you can invest on their behalf, gives their investment so much more time to grow as they grow. The whole thing is online. It's very easy to set up an account. Could take you as little as 5 minutes and starts with just $20. There's no contribution limits to it. It's got tax advantages. Funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees on it. It's just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. They can be basically used for anything. And it doesn't have to just be, when they're older. When they're younger, it's music classes, it's sports, it's tuition, it's tutors, it's things like that to help them out. And then when they are a little bit older, maybe you can help them start their own business, buy their first house, buy their first car, whatever that looks like, and how you can help them there. You can join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. Well, I said that Mel was, saving Jahad Campbell for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Guess not. Guess Mel's trying to get on my bad list today. Jahad Campbell going number 17 overall to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to stop here and pause. I want to talk about this pick. I know we've sort of been going in chunks and lists here, but 17, the Bengals taking an off-ball linebacker. Now, they lose Akeem Davis-Gaither. They've got Logan Wilson, and it's like, all right, well, who's playing next to Logan Wilson? I can understand sort of the thought of linebacker here, but man, they really need edge rusher. They really need interior defensive line, certainly interior offensive line as well. A guy like Ray Zabel we often talk about here at number 17. But is Campbell just the pure talent that they need to take here? Do you think that this is just he can affect basically the second level of the defense? He makes the linebackers better. You believe in him as a pass rusher and a blitzer. What do you think about Campbell going to the Bengals here? Because on the surface level, it looks like a luxury pick that I don't know if the Bengals can afford to make given the trench needs that they have. But do you feel like it brings enough value to them here at 17?
I don't think it's a luxury pick at all when you consider, I don't know if it's been officially done, but it's assumed that Jermaine Pratt won't be on the roster in 2025. So you look next to Logan Wilson and you go, what is there, right? And Campbell, I think when you look at it again, in the context of depth and building an entire draft class, right? It's a very deep defensive line class. Even if they need help in the secondary, it's a little bit deeper. I only see maybe 4 guys at linebacker who I think could start immediately in the NFL, and their rookie season. And Campbell is clearly the best one in this class. I think to put Campbell next to Logan Wilson would be a big asset. I know, look, everybody here in Cincinnati wants a defensive lineman. This guy's behind the glass, banging on the glass right now for me to say, hey, tell them to take a defensive lineman. But I think the talent of Campbell, the lack of depth at linebacker, and the depth that you do have on the defensive line, it's going to be much easier to find defensive linemen on day 2 than it is going to be to find linebackers on day 2 and day 3. It's a thin linebacker class. Again, I think there's only maybe 4 guys who can start as rookies at linebacker this year. So, look, I think Campbell, for the value at 17, and yes, it's a hole. If they have nobody next to Logan Wilson, it's going to be a problem. I have no issue with this pick at all.
Salensi in the chat's pissed. Says if the Bengals pick isn't a defensive line, I'm giving Mel a Stern talking to. And then obviously we announced that it was not, and it was the stern-faced emoji, basically just 1,000-yard staring into this pick. Jay asked, why are you skipping the Dolphins? We didn't skip the Dolphins. We said that they got Jahdae Barrett. We mentioned that in the list. It was, them getting Jahdae Barrett. I think they're taking an outside corner, but I don't know when they're going to take an outside corner. I'm not so sure it's going to be at 13. Again, sort of the same conversation that I had with the San Francisco 49ers. Can see it. I'd go with the trench pick instead. So just to make sure that, we didn't skip the Dolphins. We read the Dolphins. But for this pick here, look, I think Jahad Campbell's a great football player. Again, if you believe he's got tons of different versatility for you, I can understand it for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think you bring up a great point about overall draft strategies. Understanding where classes are weak and where they might be very top-heavy is probably a better way to say it, and the ones that are a lot deeper. And you're right. You have a much better chance of getting a starting caliber linebacker and a starting caliber, or at least rotational, offensive lineman and defensive lineman on day 2 than you do drafting one of those positions here and trying to find a linebacker later. It's just going to be slim pickings, I think, in this current class. So I think it's just an interesting point that you bring up there. The Seattle Seahawks at number 18, Mel has them taking Kelvin Banks Jr. We have talked about that as a great landing spot for him, as somebody who could start his career for them at guard, immediately be a starter at one of those guard spots, and then potentially kick out to offensive tackle if Abe Lucas, if the knee continues to be an issue for him and he continues to miss time. He said that he's healthy. He said that he feels great, but getting somebody who can kick out to tackle, I think, would be very beneficial for them. So for the Seahawks, there's a couple of options along the offensive trenches that they could go with. Kelvin Banks Jr. is one of the better ones, in my opinion. 19, he has the Buccaneers selecting Nick Emanwori, the safety from South Carolina. Now, he says in his first sentence of the blurb, good luck throwing downfield on Tampa Bay with Emanwori and Antoine Winfield Jr. locking down that third level. So obviously high praise for how Emanwori plays on the back end. Certainly anytime that your running mate is a guy like Antoine Winfield Jr., I think that gives you a lot of flexibility to play in positions where you're really going to succeed. I think Jahad Campbell is the best pick there. I think that with him off the board, it sort of opens wide up, or it opens wide for you to pick a corner, but there's not really a great one here on the board for them. A defensive lineman, but I think a lot of the better edge rushers are taken. Like, if Mike Green's on the board, Donovan Ezeraku is on the board. So normally we see Donovan Ezeraku be the pick here at number 19 in this scenario, but doesn't go with Ezeraku. I would not be picking Emanwori because I am not nearly as high on Nick Emanwori. I have more worries about him, flipping the hips and being able to run, even with as great of a straight line speed as he has. I don't always love the mentality that he has for run defense and for tackling. I think sometimes he shies away from being as physical as he would need to be a full-time box safety. So I have my worries about Nick Emanwori, but what do you think about this one with him going in the top 20 here at 19 to the Bucs? I'm with you. I think I disagree with that first statement from Mel there. I think the thing that would concern me the most is the fluidity and the change of direction when he is covering downfield. I think if the Bucs are going to take a safety here, they should take Malachi Starks. I think that's absolutely, he's more flexible in coverage. He can get back deeper in that deep half or however you want him to on the back end. I think safety is reasonable, but I think the safety I would take is Starks. I get it with Emanwori. I get the athletic potential, but right now I'm working on finishing a top 10 to 15 safeties for a college episode, but I have Emanwori as safety number 5. I think I'm worried about his change of direction and coverage and how that would play. I wouldn't take him 19th overall. If they're going safety, I would take Malachi Starks. Yeah, I'd take Xavier Watts over Nick Emanwori, honestly.
Same.
So this one's a big reach to me, but I understand a lot of people who are just leaning into the overall athleticism. So I can understand at least where they're coming from. I don't think it shows up as functionally on the field as you would want it to. So that's why I'm a little bit skeptical. I agree. I would be going Malachi Starks here if we were talking about the same position. Denver Broncos, Tetro McMillan slides all the way to the end of the top 20, and the Denver Broncos get him here at number 20. What do you think about him pairing with Courtland Sutton and the rest of those wide receivers there?
I was talking about this exact pick because somebody yesterday had asked me, hey, Mel's got McMillan going to the Broncos at 20. Do you think, A, that's realistic, and B, what do you think of the pick? And I said, first of all, if McMillan did get to the Broncos at 20, absolute home run. Take him, run the card in. Put him with Courtland Sutton, put him with Evan Ingram now that you have. Get running backs on day 2. You got the offensive line. You got Bo Nix. I think this is one of the best picks of the first round if the Broncos were to get McMillan at 20. And from what it sounds like, league circles, scouting circles might be a little bit lower on McMillan than we are here at PFF. We believe he's a top 8 player. I certainly believe he's a top 8 player. I think it sounds like this is more and more realistic with each passing day that Matthew Golden and maybe even Emeka Ibuka could go ahead of him, right? And McMillan could drop to the low 20s or somewhere in here to the Broncos at 20 we've seen mocked. We've seen 22 to the Chargers mocked for McMillan. I think it would be a home run for the Broncos. I think it's a steal. Aside from Travis Hunter and everything he can do, I think McMillan's the best receiver in this draft, and for them to get him at 20, I think all of a sudden that Broncos offense takes a step towards becoming a nightmare for teams to defend because you've got McMillan as that 6'5" downfield threat. You've got Sutton. You've got Sean Payton drawing up plays. I think it's a fantastic pick.
I've never thought about this before, to be honest with you. But I also, I cannot find many opportunities where I've personally gone through mock drafts and feel like McMillan would make it to number 20. So that's why I've never thought about the scenario, but I think it's great for Denver. I think getting a player this good who is top 5 on my board at number 20, pretty much a home run in my opinion. Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21, no quarterback. Well, I don't want to say no quarterback on the board here to tempt them. I suppose Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, those guys obviously still on the board, but no Shedeur Sanders, no Cam Ward. He has them going Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle from Oregon. He then has the Los Angeles Chargers going with Gray Zabel, the interior offensive lineman from North Dakota State. That one's interesting. I didn't think that they needed interior offensive lineman anymore.
Unless they're trying to either replace Zion Johnson or because didn't they just re-sign Bradley Bozeman to a 2-year deal?
It's a 2-year deal, so it's not like they're giving him the farm or anything. But they signed Mekhi Becton, they have Zion Johnson, they have Bradley Bozeman. That one's a little.
It doesn't feel like it immediately helps them.
No, it really doesn't. I'm very surprised that they're going interior offensive line there. Packers taking Mykel Williams, the edge rusher from Georgia, at number 23. Vikings staying at 24, no trades. I don't know if there's a trade for that one, but or if he was allowing trades in this mock draft or if he was just going straight through it. But he takes Donovan Jackson, the guard from Ohio State, so another interior offensive lineman there for the Minnesota Vikings, and then Houston Texans will stop here at 25. Josh Connolly Jr. above Josh Simmons ends up going to Houston at number 25 with some offensive tackle needs there. So, Harmon to the Steelers at 21, Zabel to the Chargers at 22, Mykel Williams to the Packers at 23, Donovan Jackson to the Vikings 24, and then Houston Texans taking Josh Connolly Jr. at number 25. Thoughts on any of those picks there?
I think the Texans. I'm actually with it. I have Connolly ahead of Simmons in my rankings. I think without the injury, and I really like Connolly's feet. I think he mirrors well in pass protection. If you're looking for just a solid, maybe not an all-pro guy, but just a solid, stable pass protector, I think you're getting that in Josh Connolly. Obviously, both of them we've talked about kind of finesse players. And again, with the Texans, it's going to be more of a debate. I don't think you have to force feed them an offensive lineman. If Kenneth Grant is sitting here on the board, I'm thinking about it. If Luther Burden is sitting here on the board, I'm thinking about it. They have other needs on this team, but if they like Connerly enough that he could be their future left tackle, I don't have an issue with that. I think the Texans have much more of a tough decision than people think. You can't force feed an offensive lineman to, when you're sacrificing your board for maybe better players. So, look, I do like Connerly. I like him better than Simmons right now. I think he could plug and play and start there, but I think they're going to be one of the more fascinating teams on draft night because they have a harder decision, I think, than people think they do.
You know me. I'm a Josh Simmons guy. I love Josh Simmons. I understand he's coming back from the knee injury, but I thought his tape last year was awesome. It wasn't great against great competition, but I was even higher on his potential. I think going into the season, I think he was my OT5 going into the season, and for how well he played right off the bat, it's hard for me to give up on that guy. I'd be taking him as the next offensive tackle. Mykel Williams is interesting. I think that Nell is betting on the overall traits for Mykel Williams, right? Because he hasn't really developed into this pass rusher that you have wanted him to be. Some people have talked about him potentially going, top 10 overall. You and I think a lot of people at PFF have just always thought that was a little rich, given what he gives in the passing game, or doesn't give in the passing game is probably the better way to say it. Really good run defender, built very well. He likes his intangibles. I think he's strong as an ox, but does he really help the Packers the way that they currently need help on their defensive line? When I look at Mykel Williams, I go, you're kind of doing the Lucas Van Ness bet again, right? I mean, Lucas Van Ness, the reason why you bet on him is because he was somebody who you loved his run defense, you loved the plus length, he had the explosiveness there to him, but he just really wasn't the pass rusher that you wanted him to be at Iowa. And you go, okay, well, he was an interior defensive lineman, and then he was an edge, so there's a reason why, and he's still learning and everything. And I wouldn't be making that bet again. And I think especially with Lucas Van Ness already on the roster, there's a chance that you have these two players who just are good run defenders for you. They just can't get after the quarterback the way that you need to. But that's sort of how I say. What do you think about Mykel Williams as the Packers' choice here at 23?
Yeah, I'm not in love with it. I mean, there's a couple of conflicting things here, because there's one of the big debates in Green Bay lately has been the mentality and what they think about Lucas Van Ness, right? Through 2 years, he hasn't given them a whole lot. And then you look at, again, you just mentioned it, as pass rushers, Rashawn Gary led their edge defenders in pass rush grade with a 66.7 last year. They just don't have the impact guy like that who can bring them that juice off the edge. And we haven't seen, you mentioned it, that Mykel Williams can do that. His pass rush win rates, in college have hovered around 10, 11%, right around the same rates that Trayvon Walker's did when he was at Georgia, and he hasn't quite given him that elite pass rusher either, and he was the first overall pick. So I look, if they believe in his talent and they believe there's something more to unlock there, I get it. I also am holding to my Donovan Ezeraku conspiracy theory with their defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, that might be the case. I might just hold that until draft night. But, the Packers are in a tough spot. I mean, I think they're one of the harder teams for me to predict right now, because you got needs at receiver, at edge, at corners, a lot of key spots. And obviously they're not picking particularly high, but I don't know that Williams would be the pick here, even though they certainly like drafting Georgia Bulldogs too. They're another one of those teams. Obviously, they have Devontae Wyatt. They have Javon Bullard on the back end. They've had Quay Walker at linebacker. So, they've been going to Georgia for a lot of these picks before, but I'm with you. I don't know that Williams helps them all that much.
They talk as if they're okay with who they have on their defensive line right now and the development of those guys in year two of that Jeff Hafley defense. So perhaps this is not a defensive line pick after all. Maybe they go corner. Maybe they do go for a wide receiver. But, if they're going with a defensive lineman, in my opinion, you'd want to go after a guy who's had a lot more proven production in that area, like a Donovan Ezeraku.
It's such a dilemma, because they haven't taken a first-round receiver in, 23 years, right? They're talking like they want to give Lucas Van Ness one more year of a chance right off the edge, so they don't necessarily want to go with an edge player, unless maybe it's, again, the conspiracy with Ezeraku. And in this scenario, are there any corners that you're reaching for? Is it Trey Amos? Is it Siobhan Ravel? Is it Azarie Thomas? Who is it? Because if one of the top three corners, if for any reason Jahdae Barron fell to 23, which I doubt that he will, then that's who I'm taking. But are there any corners here that you're reaching for? Or does this become, with all these scenarios where we're like, we don't know what they're going to do you trade back and just get more capital and figure it out later?
I think Jahdae Barron could be on the board for them at 23. I'm a lot higher on Jahdae Barron. I like him as a top 20 pick, but I don't know if the NFL is as hot on him to be selected that high. So I think it is. You could potentially get a scenario where he is on the board for the Packers at 23. Would they pick him? We'll see. Sherry said, you said that you didn't think the Gray Zabel pick for the Chargers was good. Who do you think that would have been the best fit there? I would be taking one of three players. I'd be taking Emeka Egbuka, Luther Burden, or Kenneth Grant. All three of those players are on the board. Those are the selection. And I'd probably go Kenneth Grant, honestly, because I think losing Poona Ford, and for as much as Joey Bosa wasn't the pass rusher that you wanted him to be, I think that at least he could give you a decently high floor and run defense, although I think that was a little worse last year as well, if I remember correctly. But you need to be stout in the middle. And losing Poona Ford is not something that you could just brush off, because him in the middle of that defense, I think, meant a lot. So to me, I'd be going Kenneth Grant, but then before Gray Zabel, I'd be thinking about Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka, two guys that I have graded above Gray Zabel, who I think are better need fits for them as well. So that's what I would do there. Mr. Jekyll said, I don't think that Revel is a reach here. Savon Revel, the cornerback from East Carolina. I think he would also be in Green Bay's thresholds there at number 23, so I think that he would be on the board there. Donovan Jackson at 24 to the Minnesota Vikings. I don't mind that. If they want to continue to upgrade the offensive line, then they would have Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Donovan Jackson. I think that could lean into a lot more of their zone blocking scheme stuff that they want to do. So, hey, if they're not going to trade down from 24, make the offensive line just absolutely elite. So I do understand that being the pick here. We'll stop at number 26, because I do want to discuss this a little bit. Jackson Dart, we do get the next quarterback off the board here. 3 quarterbacks in the first round. Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss, to the Los Angeles Rams. Now, obviously, there was a lot of hoopla on what was going to happen with Matthew Stafford. Is he going to retire? Is he going to get traded? What's he going to do? Ultimately, he signs a little bit of an extension to stay with the Los Angeles Rams and what feels likely the remainder of his career, however long he is still going to play. But they have them drafting Jackson Dart to sit behind Matthew Stafford. Now, at owners' meetings, Sean McVay said, I really haven't spent a lot of time on quarterbacks. I really haven't watched any of the quarterbacks. I like the guys that we have in our room. That could very well be true, but he could be sort of omitting the truth by telling the truth, because he is also somebody who very much trusts Les Snead and that scouting staff to pick the right players. And so maybe he just hasn't taken a look at quarterbacks yet. Right? I don't know. But he said that they weren't really interested in quarterbacks, so that he hasn't done a lot of work on quarterbacks. Do you believe that? And then what do you think about them spending a first-round pick on a quarterback here in Jackson Dart?
I think it would run very much counter to the mentality that they've shown us this offseason, right, of preferring to have Matthew Stafford back. Obviously letting him, go through his options and see if there's anything out there as far as the money, but keeping Matthew Stafford, signing Devontae Adams, right? I think you make these moves because you feel like you're close to winning a Super Bowl, winning the NFC, going to a Super Bowl this season, right? And I don't think taking your quarterback of the future in Jackson Dart in the first round, I think it runs counter to that. I think they have what they need if they're going to try to compete this season for a Super Bowl is more help on defense. I think they could use more depth off the edge. They need help at linebacker. They need help at corner. Those are 3 spots that I'd be looking at. Actually, the more that I've looked at their roster, this is a spot where I would really heavily think about one of these edge defenders to pair along with Jared Verse and add into the rotation with Byron Young. When you talk about James Pierce Jr. and Donovan Ezaraku sitting there as stand-up edge rushers, I think they'd be perfect fits for this team. I get the idea. Get a quarterback in there. He can sit behind Stafford. He can learn McVay's system behind the scenes. It's kind of the ideal scenario that you want. What the Falcons did with Penix, what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, right? But I think the Rams have this mentality that they're trying to win a Super Bowl this year. I think they believe they're only a piece or two away from competing with Philly. They darn near beat them last year. You've made the argument before. If it didn't start a blizzard in that game in the second half in Philadelphia, the Rams might have won that game. They had the momentum, right? And they just started. They had a hard time playing in the snow. They were turning the football over. They couldn't pass protect, things like that. I think it just runs counter to everything they're doing right now as a franchise. I get the speculation. It's 26. If Dart's on the board and other people think he's a first-round type prospect and he's going to be big time. But if the Rams are trying to win this year, which I think they're trying to considering the moves they've made this offseason, Poona Ford as well, that was another one they brought in. I think this is going to be a defensive player. I think it's going to be an edge player or corner at this spot. Or this is another team, they don't have a ton of capital. I could see them trading back and then stockpiling day 2 picks on defense.
Another spot where if Jahdae Barron makes it to them at 26, I think he's perfect for them. I really do.
Couldn't be more. If he ever got here to 26, I don't know what kind of miracle that would take. No, that would be more than perfect. That would be the A+, maybe best pick of the first round.
I feel as though 26 is truly his floor. I really do in this draft. I think that the only way that this sort of makes sense or even happens, in my opinion, is if they believe Jackson Dart is like a top 15 player in this class. Because if they do, then they're probably sitting here and saying to themselves, hey, we got Matthew Stafford back. We probably got him for another 2 years. We brought in Devontae Adams. We brought in Poona Ford. We're all in. We're all in on still making this run. We don't think we're going to be picking high again. over the next 2 years. We expect to be a playoff team. We expect to make playoff runs. We expect to be pretty damn good. So in my opinion, the only way that they make this pick is if they think Jackson Dart is that good. If they believe they can't pass on him because they have him as a top 15, top 12 player overall in this class, then I think I could understand them wanting to make the pick because they don't believe they're going to pick highly enough the closer we get to Matthew Stafford's retirement. But I don't think they're going to have Jackson Dart ranked that high. So I agree with you. I think it's much more likely a defensive selection. Rapid fire a little bit here as we get to the end of the first round because I do want to have some time to touch on some of these second round picks. Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, going to the Baltimore Ravens at number 27. Donovan Ezeraku, the linebacker from Boston College, go to the Lions at number 28. Shamar Stewart, pass rusher from defensive lineman, I should just say, from Texas A&M to the Commanders at 29. Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, to the Bills at 30. Josh Simmons, a very common pick here, offensive tackle from Ohio State, going to the Chiefs at 31. And then at 32, the Philadelphia Eagles get James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. Anybody stand out in that group that I just listed off?
I think it's those last two picks for me. I think Josh Simmons on the talent play to Kansas City here at 31. I think this one's realistic to me. I could see the Chiefs taking that chance. You get a talented, athletic guy like Simmons. They need help at tackle. It feels like one way or the other, they're going to take trench depth, right? They're going to take either an offensive tackle, possibly even a guard. Maybe they would think about a Tyler Booker, or they'll go on the defensive line somewhere in the interior. And I find it interesting, too, that we don't get Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan taken here in this first round for Mel. So I think that's interesting and maybe speaks to what he's prioritizing with those interior guys, with Derek Harmon going much earlier at 21, but Nolan and Grant both falling out of the first round. And then, look, the Eagles, again, they have a luxury pick here at 32. They can replenish the edge. They can replenish the inside. I mean, James Pierce Jr., how much more pass rush do the Eagles need? Honestly, I mean, that's all I look at is I go, if he falls to 32, well, that just feels like something that'll work, doesn't it? Where they'll rotate him in. They'll have Nolan Smith starting ahead of him. They got this deep rotation, and then for 30 snaps a game, you get James Pierce Jr. It feels like it's not even fair.
That would be one hell of a luxury pick that Philadelphia has done over the last couple of years and been a big reason why they are Super Bowl champions right now. I like the addition of Malachi Starks as well for the Ravens. A lot of people are kind of saying in the chat that they like the pick, but okay, Igbuka, like Juwan Clark in the chat saying, love Starks for the Ravens at 27, but would only take him if Shamar Stewart is gone. He was still on the board at that time, or Igbuka, and they think that they could get another wide receiver in there, and they're not going to bring Rashad Bateman back. So it seems like there is some love for Malachi Starks to play in that Ravens defense. I absolutely love it. I think that he'd be great. He could play slot for you. He could play free safety. He could play strong safety. He could just be another great versatile piece for them to continue to help that secondary. The Ezeraku, and I think the Ezeraku and Shamar Stewart sort of like parallels there with them going 28 and 29 is very interesting because I just wonder, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm not going to know the answer to this until we get to really draft night. What do the Lions actually want from their second edge rusher? I think a lot of people look at their second edge spot and they go, well, they got to have another pass rusher, right? To like bring the heat off of Aiden Hutchinson. They need another pass rusher, somebody who's better at getting after the passer. I don't know, do they? Because they set up their defensive line last year when everybody was fully healthy. They set up their defensive line specifically just to get Aiden Hutchinson as many one-on-ones as possible. And he was winning at a clip that was going to be the highest pass rush win percentage we have ever seen from any NFL player ever. I mean, he was on a nuclear pace before he got hurt. So clearly what they did last year was working. If you just want a massive, heavy-handed edge rusher to be able to play inside and out for you, to align your defensive line, to just get Aiden on the opposite side as many one-on-ones as possible, you take Shamar Stewart, in my opinion, because he's got the size and he's just got the overall like physical stature to be imposing, stop the run, he's got the length, he's got all of that. If you want the better pass rusher to complement or take that pressure off of Aiden Hutchinson in a different way, you would take Donovan Ezeraku because he's been better at it. He's shown you he's got more production. So that little parallel with those two guys going there, because in my opinion, if these two guys are on the board, one of them's going 28, one of them's going 29. I totally agree with where Mel is in debating sort of these two defensive linemen. It just sort of depends on what the team picking first at 28, the Detroit Lions, wants to actually do. What do you think? Do you have a preferred strategy there for for the Detroit Lions with what they have as their second edge rusher?
I think I like the idea of Ezraku going there. And we have to remember, look, in his own way, certainly not built anywhere near the same way that Shamar Stewart is, but Ezraku is a good run defender too. And he's one of the very few players in the country who's got an 80-plus run defense grade in each of the last 3 seasons. This guy knows what he's doing on early downs off the edge too. And they've got depth on their defensive line. I think we have to remember something with their run defense. Look, by the end of last year, both DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil were hurt. When you have those two guys on the field in the interior, your run defense is about to be really, really good. I think you get those interior guys healthy, it helps a lot. I like the idea with Ezraku. I think what they're missing is pass rush depth. They tried to get it with Zadarius Smith, but you can't replace Aiden Hutchinson's production, right? And obviously, Hutchinson being healthy is the key to this whole thing, but having that second legitimate known pass rusher like you get with Ezraku, that's the same direction I would go in.
So I also agree with you. I'd also pick Ezraku, but also just because I like him better as a football player. All right, that's the first round there from Mel Kiper Jr. He did a full second round as well, so we're going to pick out just a couple of selections there that we have in the second round. So I give Dalton a little bit of extra time to look over some of those second round picks, pick a couple of his favorites, because I got to tell you, everybody out there, PFF's draft coverage is brought to you by our friends over at Jack's Links with their Duos product. Jack Links knows that there's nothing greater than a great duo. That's why they've created the new Jack Links Duos. The new product brings 2 flavors in one bag. So it's not one piece of beef jerky that has like 2 flavors on it. It's 2 different flavored beef jerkies in one bag, so you get the full complement. Jack Links knows that the NFL draft can create some great duos, right? Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase being reunited from their LSU days as a great duo that we have seen in the NFL. Guys like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua getting, to work as 2 fantastic wide receivers in LA. One that Mel Kiper Jr. and we have also shouted out here, Armand Membu and Olu Fashanu. That is a duo that we could love with the New York Jets. Those 2 offensive tackles teaming up. You got an excellent athletic left tackle and an excellent athletic right tackle as well. This is our dream duo here, Olu Fashanu and Armand Membu. I know that Fashanu's grade is a little bit lower from 2024, but he was still figuring it out along an offensive line that was figuring it out. That's going to be a lot better, especially when you have a great duo on the other side. Just like the NFL draft, duos, Jack Links gives you your favorite duos in the same bag. Mango and jalapeno, I had that the other day. The sweetness of the fruity flavor and the spice of the jalapeno was a really great combination. Original and teriyaki, they've got that in the same bag. And then a tried and true flavor combination, buffalo and ranch as well. So those are some of the duos that you guys can basically find everywhere. Anywhere you get Jack Links beef jerky, they're going to be able to have duos for you, or you can at least check it out in those locations, convenience stores, and select Walmarts as well. So make sure you check out those great products. They're really fantastic. In the second round, what do we got here, Dalton? Who you pointing out here with this second round selection? 1 or 2 guys that really stand out to you that you like, whether it's a draft strategy or just really good draft value here.
Can I point out 3 different things? Can I have 3? I'll take 3 different teams here.
You know what?
I'll be quick about it. Promise.
No, okay. You won't. But that's fine. That's fine. That's what the show's all about.
I always have something to rant about. Okay, so we've got with the Chicago Bears here at 39 and 41. So we took Tyler Warren first round. At 39, they get Walter Nolan, and at 41, they get Travion Henderson. I think for an
absolute dub,
a 3-man haul like that, if they were to ever actually, I've been talking about them maybe trading up back into the first round to get a guy like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant. If this were to ever fall naturally to the Bears, look out. I mean, Tyler Warren, Walter Nolan, Travion Henderson, you couldn't do much better with the first 3 picks than that. Stacking up with the Denver Broncos, we got Ted McMillan at 20, Quinshon Judkins here at 51. Perfect. I mean, you get another legitimate wide receiver out there next to Cortland Sutton. Then you get especially an early down workhorse back. I think a guy in Quinshon Judkins that could remind Sean Payton a lot of Mark Ingram from the New Orleans days. And then he looks for more of those matchup problems, those jokers that he was looking for later in the draft. And the last one, I want to go to the very last pick. I'm going to call out the Eagles again here in a pick that I really, really like, especially in their defense. And I think someone who's going to get undervalued because he didn't play much this year with an injury, Kevin Winston Jr. to the Eagles at 64. Boy, I'm going to tell you something, Trev. I think even with the injury right now, I have him as the 3rd best safety in this draft. He's maybe the best tackler at any position in this draft. Kevin Winston Jr., if he had played this year, I think might have been a first-round pick. I really do. You might have been talking about him going somewhere in the 20s. This is a really good football player, and in Vic Fangio's defense, playing next to Reed Blankenship, I know you're a big Sidney Brown guy, but man, if they took Kevin Winston Jr. at 64, I think you got a serious player there that's really a top 30 talent in this draft, and again, just didn't play much this year, only played 2 games this year with his injury.
Yeah, I think that he's got all the talent in the world, right? We just saw some not great games from him at the beginning of the year, and then he had his injury. And so I think that's the only reason why we're really talking about him as low as we are. But certainly for the Eagles, it makes sense. Even with Sidney Brown, like you need a pretty... I think a lot of people look at safety and they go, oh, okay, they have their starting 2 safeties. A lot of times in the NFL, you're running rotations now anyways. You've got to keep it pretty deep. And so I do like that addition for Kevin Winston Jr. I don't know how high he's going to go in this draft, but for him to go to Philadelphia, I do like that. Before we get to some picks that I like, because I already found a couple that I really love, Salensi with the $10 super chat. We love you. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Said, with the first round, what pick would you both have personally changed? And who would you have picked in those spots, how the board fell? I talked about this one already a little bit. Mine's the Chargers one. I would change the Chargers pick of Gray Zabel. I wouldn't have Gray Zabel as the pick there at 22. For as much as I like Gray Zabel as a prospect, you had Kenneth Grant on the board. You had Luther Burden on the board. You got Emeka Egbuka on the board. It's one of those 3 guys. I would be picking Kenneth Grant, especially with them losing Poona Ford. I think that they would need that presence at nose tackle that they can depend on, who can be the sort of the anchor of that defensive line. So I would change the Chargers pick. I think that would be the pick that I would most want to change there, outside of maybe my Bucks not taking Eman Worry and taking Donovan Ezeraku instead. But is there a pick that you would change or that you gravitate towards the most when it comes to changes from Mel's mock?
The Cowboys at 12 over. I would take a defensive player over Amarion Hampton. And look, okay. I like Hampton a lot. He could go later in the first round. I don't think the 12th overall pick should be a running back for the Dallas Cowboys. For me personally, I would go Jahad Campbell with this pick. I think they don't have an alpha presence at linebacker. Matt Eberflus, their new defensive coordinator, is a linebackers coach at heart. He's going to need that guy in the middle to really run the show. I know he brought Jack Sanborn over with him. That's depth. They traded for Kenneth Murray. He hasn't shown much in his first few years in the NFL, especially in the run game. I would reset that linebacker position with Jahad Campbell, wait for DeMarvion Overshown to get healthy and run with that as the starters and those other guys as depth. I'm not taking Amarion Hampton 12th overall.
Dude, okay, so I want to have the quarterback conversation, and we will in a second. I think the 2 hauls that I maybe like the most in the first and the second round, you mentioned that the Bears are a great one, obviously. The 3 guys that they're picking there, they're fantastic. So, one, did you see that the 49ers get Kenneth Grant at 43?
Yep, I saw that one too. That's up there. That's big time. I mean,
so like
Will Johnson and Kenneth Grant
Will Johnson,
is crazy. Yeah.
That's all of a sudden like, I'm back in, Mel. Like you got me back in. If you can guarantee that I'm getting Kenneth Grant at 43, I'm back in. That actually wasn't the one that I was going to shout out, though. The Atlanta Falcons getting Mike Green in the first round and then Benjamin Morrison in the second round. Love it. Truly love it. That hits your top 2 needs with some really good players. And then the Denver Broncos, man. You get Tetro McMillan at 20 in the first round, and then you get Quinshawn Judkins in the second round. That is just... I mean, your offense is totally changed or totally upgraded, I think, from what it even was last season. So, Bo Nix, Sean Payton, I think they would continue to cook with that sort of a draft haul. So, really like those 2 draft hauls there and those 2 picks. Again, you can see all of these picks over at ESPN.com if you have an ESPN Plus account. So, I want to end the show with this. Mel's got Tyler Shuck, the quarterback from Louisville, as QB4, getting picked at the top of the second round at pick number 33 from the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns at number 2, they got Travis Hunter, and he has them taking a quarterback at number 33, but it is the 26-year-old journeyman, oft-injured, yet very talented Tyler Shuck. What do you think about Shuck being QB4 and being picked as a fringe first-round selection here at number 33 for the Browns?
I mean, as far as the depth of the class goes, beyond the first 2 guys, at this point, I really don't know what to make of it. I think people can put them in almost any order, and I know Dart's come out as kind of consensus QB3, and I think I don't know that this many quarterbacks are going this early. I just don't. I don't feel like, and I know Jalen Milroe was now invited to Green Bay to go sit in on the draft. I'm sure Jackson Dart will be as well, but honestly, if Tyler Shuck goes to Cleveland at 33, there's a very good chance he's going to start. I mean, do we feel comfortable with that at all? Because I don't think the Browns are set up for a rookie to succeed anyway, even if they do bring in Travis Hunter. I don't know where the run game is right now. Their offensive line is older and needs a lot of work. I think you're really I think you're really gambling there, and that's a valuable pick. That's something close to a first-round pick, especially in this draft with the 33rd overall pick. And it'd be a similar road that, say, the Titans tried to go with Will Levis, and obviously that didn't work. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think both of these teams at the top of the second round, the Browns and the Giants, have other needs they can fill. Really, they could get good football players with those picks, especially the Giants. I get the idea of Jalen Milroe and, Brian Daboll helped Josh Allen so much and all of that, but I don't know. I think we're getting jumpy with these quarterbacks. 5 in the top 34. I don't know that it's going to happen.
Look, I don't mind, Jalen Milroe getting to link up with Brian Daboll. I think that's a good spot, honestly. So, I don't hate the landing spot there. It is like the quarterbacks that are going pretty early. And I think this is just a matter of, after Cam Ward, I just think that there's a lack of traits in this quarterback class. And that's why it feels like we're propping up Tyler Shough, because in my opinion, Shuck's got one of the better arms in the class. I think he has one of the stronger arms in the class that at least you could tell yourself, hey, he's got arm talent that I don't have to overcome. But the big issue for him, and what I saw in Tyler Shuck's tape, is it's not just the injuries. It's, in my opinion, what the injuries have sort of done to him and how he approaches the game. There's a lot of time where, or there are too many reps, in my opinion, where he's either fading away from contact, drifting too far in the pocket, getting rid of the ball before he needs to, because he doesn't want to get hit, because he's been hurt a bunch. In my opinion, his game is a little bit more reminiscent of like late stage of their career Rodgers or Breeze or Manning or Brady. And obviously, like, these are the best guys. And he's like, oh, okay, you're comparing them to them. That's not bad. But what I'm really comparing them to is these guys didn't want to get hit. They didn't want to hold on to the football. And so I sort of saw that from Shough while I was watching his tape this past year at Louisville, is there were too many times when, yeah, he's got a great arm and he can absolutely rip it, but he wasn't okay under pressure the way that I need my quarterback to be at the NFL level. And I think he's afraid to get hit. He's had so many injuries, and it's understandable that would go into it. But that is my big critique of him. The age, okay, yeah, I've talked about this before. Age for quarterbacks really doesn't matter that much to me, because you could play the game like into your mid and late 30s, even 40s for some of these great guys that are still around in their 40s. But you could play the game for a long time. So even with Tyler Shough at 20 as a 26-year-old rookie, if you think this guy is going to be your starting quarterback in his rookie season and get a second contract, you don't really care, because a second contract is going to take him up to 34, 35, and there's plenty of quarterbacks that are still starting in the league at 34, 35. So the age isn't that big of an issue for me. What's really the issue is the injury history and how it has affected how he approaches the game. So I think we're gonna continue to talk about Tyler Shough a lot, because it feels like there's a lot of momentum for him to be potentially a top 5 quarterback, maybe even QB3 off of the board. I've heard that from some people. I'm just much more skeptical of it, because I don't like drafting a guy who's had the injury history that he has had, is already playing like a late stage quarterback in terms of wanting to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. And then specifically to Cleveland's on the cusp of a massive offensive line rebuild. I mean, over the next 2 to 3 years, Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, and Ethan Posick all could be gone. Like, over the next 2 to 3 years, all those guys, and you already have offensive tackle issues. You already potentially have to fill an offensive tackle need, and that's with Conklin even still on the roster. So that's what really worries me, is you might have to completely overhaul that offensive line. You might have to play in an offense that requires you to hold on the ball a little bit longer, and I just didn't really see him lean into that a lot when he was at Louisville. So that's my Tyler Shough thoughts, because I don't think we've gotten those out here on this YouTube channel yet.
Agreed. Can he stare down the barrel and throw balls down the middle of the field? Not that he doesn't have the arm talent for it, but can he stand in the pocket and do that? Because to me, in that offense too, and what I've seen from Tyler Shough throughout his career is more of a willingness to chuck the ball down the sidelines, right? Those go balls, and Jeff Brom did a great job. Obviously, he's one of the best play designers in college football, and he's had a ton of his quarterbacks drafted, maybe not necessarily this high, but he's done this with a bunch of reclamation projects throughout his career. When you talk about guys like Mike White and Aiden O'Connell and Jack Plummer last year and this year with Tyler Shough, Jeff Brom's just one of the quarterback whisperers down there at Louisville. So I think with Shough, he maximized, just like he did with those previous guys I just mentioned, he maximized his skill set. You can tell, you mentioned it, he's been through a lot of the injuries. And the funny part is that when you go back and watch how he suffered some of those injuries, a lot of it's his own recklessness, taking off running the football and things like that. I remember a broken collarbone where he's trying to dive into the end zone and score. I mean, I just think with Shuck, I get the appeal, I get the arm talent, there's some nice off-platform throws, but 33, again, I just think it's forcing it. I think even for Milroe, I think even for Dart, for the sake of quarterback speculation, and that's always the fun position to speculate, and we always think these teams are so urgent, but we saw this also, what was it, in 2022, when there really wasn't a true first-round prospect. There was less than you didn't even get the top two guys you got in this draft. Kenny Pickett went in the early 20s, right? Mm-hmm. And then we didn't get another quarterback selected till Desmond Ridder, at the top of the third round, I think it was. I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if you saw the first two drafted, and Shedeur maybe even lower than I thought he would get drafted originally, and then you get this big gap because maybe the league just doesn't believe that much. Now, again, if Jalen Milroe's getting invited to Green Bay to go to the draft, that feels like somebody in the top 40 is going to take him. I know Will Levis dropped to the first pick of the second round, but I think it just feels like right now we're forcing it. And everybody's getting antsy and they want to see where all these quarterbacks are going, but it's just not as deep a class as it was last year. And I think getting Shuck at 33 and even Milroe at 34, I don't know that the Giants have to force that. They have other needs on their team they could go after. I think that could be an offensive tackle. I think that could be somebody at running back. I think they could take a running back to complement Tracy and Singletary. I think you have other options, and this is a moment where even the Rams, I mentioned it with the Rams at 26, it doesn't run with the mentality they've had all offseason of winning this year. I don't think taking a quarterback at 26 does that. I do think once you get by Pittsburgh, you could see a real dry spell here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like that's how the draft should go. The draft often goes in a way where it is completely unpredictable, and that's why it's a lot of fun. Go read the rest of Mel Kiper's mock draft over at ESPN Plus. If you got any ESPN Plus, a subscription. If you want to go do your own mock draft, if this guy's you in the mock draft mood, head on over to PFF.com. Make sure you get yourself a PFF Plus subscription, and then you can run as many mock drafts as possible. So you could do 1 round, 2 round, 3 rounds, all the way up to 7 rounds if you guys have that PFF Plus subscription. So make sure you do that. If you haven't downloaded the draft guide as well, you should. It's got a lot of really great information. All sorts of scouting report, strength, weaknesses, all that great PFF data that you guys know and love. So go check that out as well. We got one more episode for you this week. Tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we're going to be ranking the defensive backs that we have in the 2025 NFL Draft. So corners, safeties, all that good stuff. Appreciate everybody getting in the chat, getting in on the show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman. We'll see you guys tomorrow. See you then.